Hello everyone, I'm Ben Johnson and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. On Perpetual Chess, I have weekly conversations with chess players, personalities, authors, and adult improvers about their lives, their careers, and about chess improvement. Perpetual Chess is brought to you through the generosity of its Patreon and PayPal supporters. For more information, go to perpetualchesspod.com. Hey everyone, welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We have another author out with a comprehensive new book that we're going to discuss. It is his 9th book. He is an IM from Massachusetts. He was the New Hampshire, Nevada, and Massachusetts state champion. He's competed in the U.S. Championship. He's been a top 50 player in the United States. He also is a tremendously accomplished adult improver. He took his rating from the high 2100s in his early 20s to a peak of 2565 in his 40s. His rating graph is something to be jealous of. These days, he makes his living as a chess trainer and author and joins us from his home in the Boston area where he lives with his wife and kids. David Vigorito, thank you for joining us. Did I get all of the important details?
I think so. You even taught me some things about myself.
Excellent. What did you learn?
I didn't realize my rating trajectory there.
It's amazing. It's incredible. So I know for listeners, David, when I reached out to him, said not only had he not heard this podcast, he has which I totally get. Don't get me wrong, but he had never heard any podcast. So he would not be aware that David, in addition to interviewing a lot of strong players and authors and personalities like yourself, occasionally I interview people who are working chess enthusiasts who've shown significant gains in their rating. And I think you're at the top of the heap in this category as detailed by that rating gain. So if you don't mind, David, I'd actually like to start with that and hear how on earth you improved so much as a fully formed adult.
Sure. I don't think it was quite that simple. I didn't really start playing tournaments until I was 16. I don't really have any memory before that. I might have done like a couple little tiny scholastic things like once a year or something. But when I was 16, my first rating, I think, was like 1172 based on 4 games. And then after it became a official rating, it was 1312. So this is at age 16, which, as you know now, is you're already a dinosaur at that point. And yeah, I remember telling this to a friend, Steven Zierk, and he was like shocked that I became an IM when I started at 16. But I became a master, I think, at 18, so that would have been the late 80s. You said I was in the 2100s in my 20s. I mean, that's certainly possible. Of course, you might break 2200 and then be, 2180 or something.
Yeah, you were high 2100s.
That. Wow. Yeah, I think when you look at the USCF, the MSA, it only goes back to 93. So, but yeah, I guess maybe you looked at some annual lists.
No,
or
I think it was 91.
Was it 91?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I was 21.
So first of all, it sounds like you must have, people don't like to come on here and talk about how talented they are, but I will. Okay, good. Good. Yeah. So that way we don't have to dance around it because it's really impressive to even make master in 2 years. So, what was your strength? Were you just good at tactics? Were you studying chess all the time? If you were to attribute your early success to one thing, what would it be?
Yeah, I never really thought of myself as being good at tactics. I do know that in this stretch from maybe age 16 to age 19 or something, or maybe it was going like, maybe it was even younger, but from the 1300 up to 2100 or something, I received, I wish I had kept it, I received some kind of mysterious newsletter once in the mail that was maybe from some chess club in Pennsylvania or something like that listed like the young players, because 16 was young at the time, and their improvement. And on the list, it was like the person that had gained the most points had gained like 650 points. I had gained like 642. And then the third biggest gain in a year was like 200 or something. So me and somebody else just gained like a ton of points. I don't know who that other person was because I didn't keep it. But I think in this stretch from like around age 16 to 18 and maybe a little beyond, I was really just playing a lot. I mean, back then studying was different. There were no computers. You'd have to set up a board and use a magazine, whether it be Chess Life or maybe Inside Chess back then. And, in an evening, if you wanted to study chess, what were you doing? You're looking at like 3 or 4 games because you got to set up the pieces and stuff like that. But I think it was really I was playing a lot. Back then there were more tournaments, and I was maybe playing like twice a month pretty steadily, and like four round weekend tournaments, things like that. And there were more tournaments that were probably like 2 games a day. I do remember one rating list because back then I think they only came out 4 times a year, so it was every 3 months. But I went from like 1600s to 1900s. So, like a point of trivia, perhaps, I was never a 17 or 1800 player.
Man.
Ever. Yeah.
So, did you have a coach? Were you analyzing your games, or was it just?
No. I never had any coaching at all. I told my friend Dennis Monokroussos, I think it was him once, that I had a very good coach, but I was a very poor student. But the people were the same because I was the coach.
Right.
No, I just played a lot. I looked at, I remember like a couple certain books helped me with positional understanding. I always thought of myself as like a strategic player more than a tactical player. And I remember like looking at every game in Pawn Structure Chess by Soltis. And he also had Art of Defense. So I looked at a lot in that. And I think looking at those books when I was, 17 years old or something, taught me a lot. And I think as far as like tactics, maybe just like playing a lot, even when you have like really little kids that are where you can't even gauge their strength, if they would be rated 100, 150, 200. I'll even tell parents, like they have to play. You can't just keep explaining everything to them. It's like you can't like explain to somebody how to swim over and over and over again. Like you have to get in the water, right?
Yeah, it's a good analogy. And then your 20s, you still just kept going higher and higher.
Yeah, I made some kind of breakthrough. I was probably about 21 where I went over 2,300 in one tournament from the mid 2200s. It was like I got like 3.5 out of 4 against players like around 2,500 in a game 60, and I jumped over 2,300. So that was the breakthrough. And I moved to Las Vegas when I was 26, and I was probably still like, 2,350 to 2,400 then. But yeah, once I got over 2,300, I might not have taken me that long to get to 2,400.
And how did your study methods change as you matured?
Well, I mean, back then it was just books, I guess. So I was looking at annotated games. I think the one, I guess, lesson you could say that I took, I had an hour with Mark Dvoretsky once.
Oh, man.
When he was visiting Boston. But, okay, I mean, he basically, he was, of course, he's this renowned coach and stuff. But everything that he showed me ended up just being a couple examples in his books and stuff of some end games. And so it wasn't, I mean, it was pretty cool. And I think it was expensive at the time. But it wasn't, he didn't give me a magic potion, he just showed me, some Ulf Andersson end games or something and said, yeah, try to study annotated games and things like that, which is what I was doing. I mean, back then, that's how we improved. Like, that's why resources like Inside Chess and maybe New in Chess magazine were big resources because the games were annotated by the players, maybe Informant to some degree, but they're annotated with symbols, so you didn't have that prose to really explain what was going on. It's different now because nobody wants to give anything away. So the openings are annotated differently because nobody wants to give anything away. Interesting.
So, like in an opening book or just in the periodicals? Because there's been an explosion of opening books, and obviously we're going to talk about Playing the Najdorf, your new book, in due time. But so do you feel like, where are people holding things back? In what settings?
Where are they holding them back? What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that people don't want to give stuff away.
Oh, well, I think even if you look at like a New in Chess magazine where you have annotations by Giri or whoever, they're not going to talk too much about the details in the opening.
Yeah, they're not going to say like that was a good move, but I have a theoretical novelty.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so they're and it's funny because you read them and you can tell they're being like a little dodgy, or sometimes it'll even just kind of skip through certain points where if you're somebody that's in the know with that certain opening, they'll kind of pass over a certain period and just get to the middle game. But still, that's very useful because if you're studying an opening, it's not just that you have to like understand the first 15 moves. So if like you have a player like Giri or MVL or something, and they're annotating the whole game, it'll give you insight to structure and stuff like that, end games, kind of everything. But it was different when I was younger because you had like these books like the I forget the publisher, but they were all gray, like the Winning With series. So you had like Winning with the Dragon.
I remember those,
by Chris Ward. And I'll joke with some friends, like it was like those were the good old days. Like you had a book like Winning with the Dragon, and it would just paint this nice picture, and it was exciting. And you'd read through the book. Maybe you'd play over 2 or 3 games in the book. And even as like a 2350 player, then you could go to the tournament and play the opening.
Right. Yeah.
Like that was it. You didn't know it was losing in certain lines. So
there was no real accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very different. And it was kind of nicer in a way,
Yeah, ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. You could get away with it because your opponent had the same ignorance.
Yeah, exactly. So I still feel like that. I'm sure there's people listening feeling like you make it sound so easy how you made this tremendous rating gain. So obviously it sounds like you were just lapping up anything you could get your hands on in terms of chess literature. But as you continued to get stronger, did you take a more serious approach to analyzing your games, or was that not the emphasis of your chess training?
Yeah, honestly, no, not really. I'm inherently pretty lazy, I guess. So I can't really recall a time that I really worked hard on my game. And this will allow us to segue into something else at some point too about where I am today. But I never really, I look at some openings and stuff. I actually think about these times when I was in Vegas, like in the 90s, where I decided, all right, I'm going to play blah, blah, blah. And I'd like look at all the informants, and looking back, it was like you couldn't remember any of this, like this deep theory and stuff. And I think a lot of it was kind of useless, trying to look at things too deeply then. But yeah, I didn't really work too hard on it. I did a lot of stuff, like looking at books and playing on ICC, like the early days of ICC. This was around 96, 97. And that's again, like, it's like saying like, nobody taught me to swim, but I was in the pool all the time.
Right.
So you kind of develop some abilities, but I don't remember really going over my games and being like, doing what you were supposed to do, like being self-critical and trying to figure out like, all right, what are my weaknesses?
So just out of curiosity, David, what's your family background? Like, what are your parents good at?
My mother is a nurse. She's retired now, and my father also retired. Worked at Raytheon.
Okay.
Which is funny because I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts, and the Raytheon is in Andover, Massachusetts, and that's where I live now. I live about 2 miles from there, but nothing to do with chess. I didn't grow up with 2 college professor parents or anything.
Right.
Like
I was thinking like linguist or musician or some hook.
No, I know. Yeah. I tell parents like they'll think chess is similar to math. And I say, I think it's more similar to like learning a language or learning music or something. But on the other hand, like I can't speak any languages other than English, and I can't play any instrument. So I guess it was all just chess. And
it seems like based on what you've achieved, I mean, if you had started 5 years earlier, who knows what you could have done? Do you think about that ever, or did you? Yeah.
Sometimes I'll joke about that because I think I learned to play when I was about 7, and could beat my dad pretty quickly, but didn't really start going to tournaments. So yeah, imagine if I had been kind of all encompassed by it, like from age 7 to 16.
Yeah,
I'd be world champion, right?
Yeah, I mean, worst case, you would have peaked earlier, but more likely, you would have attained some great heights.
Yeah, it's true, but I mean, what can you do, right? You can't change that. And now my own son is 7, and he likes chess, but I'm not. Cool. but I don't like, lock him in a room and make him play. It's just if he gets more interested, I'll keep feeding that, but I'm not going to make him do it.
Has he gone to any tournaments yet?
Yeah, like little unrated things,
Okay.
where everybody's kind of a beginner, but he's very composed.
That's good.
Yeah, if he loses, wins, he's very composed. He doesn't cry. He takes winning and losing both well, but it's not that he doesn't care. It's just that he can keep it together.
Okay, well, it'll be fun to track. I mean, if he takes an interest, I'm glad that you're not force feeding him. Okay, so David, we have a couple questions related to chess improvement because I touted you to the supporters of the podcast. I mean, by touted you, basically stated the facts of your rating improvement. So the first question is from Jason Green. Jason, thank you for supporting the podcast. And Jason says, I have a young family and limited time to spend on studying chess. Keeping this in mind, how would you structure a training plan for someone like me? I am 1800 for reference.
Yeah, it's difficult. Like when I've had a lot of like 1800 kids, that's kind of like my wheelhouse when I have these kids that are 17, 1800 and I can turn them into masters in a year or two. But of course their brains are absorbing everything better. And when you're an adult, you have work, you have kids, you have other responsibilities. I think you have to maybe figure out how much time you have and when you can kind of commit to it. I mean, really, I've actually asked myself this same question, even though I have the time to study. I mean, I think like working on tactics is always good, but I think really like if you're able to play tournaments, again, a lot of it comes down to like you have to play as much as you can and figure out what's going on. Because if you're playing a lot, if you're like getting killed in the opening, okay, then you have a problem there. So you have to make sure that you can, handle the opening. If you are getting great positions and then you keep hanging a piece, then you're going to have to work on tactical awareness a bit. And sometimes it's hard. I've had people that are, 1800 is like pretty good. But I've had players that they'll play well, but they'll hang their queen or a rook like every few games. And honestly, I don't really know how to fix that.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard. Like if you say everything you're doing is fine, you solve combinations, I'll show you some puzzle and you can solve it. But maybe it's like a concentration thing.
Yeah, I struggle with that too. I mean, even with lower rated players, but yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, so I don't really have a magic answer. I think it's I would focus on tactics and the opening. And the opening, I actually kind of mean the opening and middle game. Like I don't mean like, I've seen people like, they take a highlighter to an old ECO. Like that doesn't do any good.
Yeah. But
playing over a bunch of games in the opening you want to play, like the Najdorf, for example.
Just for example, yeah.
Yeah, just as a totally random example. But, because you want to have an idea what you're doing, Yeah, all right, it can help if you have somebody to talk to. Like I have plenty of adults that I know around this level. And, when I look at their games, like you see like very clear patterns. Like if they get into a situation that they're familiar with, they'll play stronger. But once they're confused, it all falls apart. A lot of 1800 adults are like 2000 or 2100 at something, and 1600 at something else.
Yeah, and in that case, which aspect would you say they should work on?
Whichever they're 1600 at.
Okay, I figured, but
yeah,
just wanted to make sure. So, I mean, I do think that's useful advice, though, because obviously this topic comes up basically every week on this show.
Yeah,
and
I'm sure.
Sometimes we talk about like what percentage of time to like it's a useful framing. If you have 10 hours a week, you spend X% on this, X% on that. But the sort of the macro view that first you figure out what's impacting your results, and of course play, which I think often is the biggest challenge, especially with these weekend tournaments.
Yeah, it is. It's much harder than it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I live in Princeton, New Jersey. I wish I was just a little bit closer to New York, because then I could do the game 30s, even though I'm terrible at game 30. But at least I could go play, be done in one night, and like not feel like a deadbeat dad, you know?
Right, get some games in.
Yeah. So another question, and this one kind of hits at what we were talking at before. So this is from Andrew Perry. So we had a couple questions from people who were in your sphere in Massachusetts, and Andrew is one of them. So Andrew says, David, I knew you in high school in Lexington, Massachusetts, when you were a much stronger player than I was, maybe 500 points stronger. 30 years later, you're now close to 1,000 points ahead of me. I suspect that you've always put more time into chess than I have, but I think that the biggest reason for the huge gap between us has always been a difference in talent. I'm 48 years old with USCF and FIDE ratings in the 1400s. I doubt that I could reach 2,000 even if I were to devote the rest of my life to a full-time study of chess. When I think about people like yourself, I get discouraged and feel stupid, even though I'm smart by other measures. For example, holding a PhD in mathematics. Do you have any words of encouragement for people like myself who wish we had more chess talent than we do?
Yeah, this is a really interesting kind of multi-part question, and I've been asked this before from similar people, like that were including a former classmate of mine in Lexington and somebody I knew back then. It's become very clear to me in adulthood that like intelligence manifests itself in different ways. I have a friend from high school who was like always ahead of me in math. He was always like 2 clicks ahead. So if I was in algebra 1, he was in not algebra 2, but in pre-calc or something. But I could always beat him at chess. And a couple of years ago, he actually sent me a note kind of asking me like why this was. Like he didn't understand why he was, because he probably thought like, wait, I'm smarter than him.
Right,
he probably got better. He got better grades. He's like, I'm smarter than him. Like, why is he always beating me down in chess?
Trying to find a diplomatic way to say that.
Yeah. But I think part of it was in school I was bored, so I never really applied myself. Like I have this old memory of, my mother telling me if I applied myself, I would get A's, or I could do nothing and get B's, whereas my sister had to like work for her B's. And I always kind of chose the do nothing and get B's.
Yeah, me too.
So, but I've met a lot of people in chess that are, could be anywhere 1,400 to 1,800 or something, where they might be, a brilliant lawyer or an entrepreneur or a mathematician. But you look at chess with them and they just don't get it. Not at the at the level maybe required for mastery. And I don't think it's intelligence. I think it's because chess is not just about intelligence. Like you have to, there's certain aspects of memory, certain aspects of, they always say like spatial relations, things like that. Because probably like Andrew says, I could probably spend the rest of my life working towards my PhD in mathematics and probably never get there.
Yeah, me too.
So it's just kind of like a different ball of wax. Probably you could have an analogy with like a great athlete where he's, good at, swimming or basketball, but he can't hit a baseball,
Yeah.
So it's, I don't think it really has anything to do with intelligence. Say, of course, you can't be, a moron and be a chess master. Although I've met a couple.
Who are they?
Well, but that's true, right? I've met some people where I'm like, how is this guy possibly a chess master? We're like, you think like, oh, this poor guy's going to die like crossing the street. Both ways.
Yeah, definitely. And it's hard it's hard. There's some things that the talented chess players seem to be good at, but then there's other things where it's like some have an amazing sense of direction and some have a terrible sense of direction, and like you don't really know exactly where the correlations lie. But yeah, for Andrew, it's tough. I suspect that he could. I don't know. What do you think? Like he says, he doubts he could even reach 2,000. I've had other IM and GM guests who said like anyone can become a master. Do you think that's true, David?
I think if you're 48 and 1,400, it's really just a hypothetical question, because like I could say, yeah, you can become a master, but you have to like quit your job and abandon your family and start doing this, like start doing tactics like 8 hours a day. So at that point, it's kind of a moot question. I don't necessarily think anybody could.
Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of things you try to teach somebody something and they just don't get it, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're not smart.
Yeah.
People have different learning curves. I've had jobs where like, I started the job and people think like I'm just clueless, but it's just the way I take it in is differently. I had a job once where, a guy later told me, he's like, when you started, I thought you were like a little bit slow.
Yeah.
And it was just because I'm doing everything very methodically. And like when you started a new job, like you don't even know where they keep the pencils and you're just trying to figure it all out. But then once I get going, I kind of like took over and became like the top person there. So the learning, but the thing is, if you don't have all that time, of course, like you're working a job, you're there 8 hours, you're going to get immersed in it. But for chess, if you have that same kind of learning curve as me, but you can't be immersed in it, you're never going to kind of get over that hump where you're like, now it's all just clicking.
And David, out of curiosity, what jobs have you had outside of chess?
I worked in sales for a long time. I worked at in retail. It was like a big, like high-end audio video store. This was out west, and it was great fun, but completely foreign to chess, right? Yeah. When I moved to Nevada, I was just doing chess for a while, but living in Las Vegas and Henderson, it's like it's small. It's like taking a couple cities and putting them on a moon. Like everything else is you're in a valley. And so and of course, like, all right, if you're 2,400 or something, like, and you're an adult, like, you're not going to be world champion. You don't really have any right to think of yourself as like a professional chess player, I guess, right? You're not going to be winning all the tournaments. So I decided to do something else that I liked, that I had done when I was like a teenager and maybe early 20s, where I was into all this audio video stuff, like high-end stereos and stuff like that. So I found a place where I could do that. It was actually like a great place to work, and I made a lot of friends, and they gave you a lot of autonomy, and you could kind of make as much money as you were able. But that industry just kind of died.
Yeah.
So when I moved back to Boston, I was already kind of shifting to chess, and that was when I was first doing my writing. That's when I was writing my first book. That was kind of a change for me when I kind of shifted. To
and I it's a good time to dig into your books, but I do just one other thing for Andrew Perry. I've noticed with various chess fans in the online sphere that at some point, you should make sure you're having fun playing. At some point, if you're not improving and it's driving you crazy, there's still other ways to appreciate chess. I know a lot of people go deep down the like chess history rabbit hole. Obviously, you can just watch and appreciate the game, or if you can find a way to disengage yourself from the results, because it's, for whatever reason it is that someone is struggling to improve. At some point, it's not super productive to get into the why and just find ways that chess can still bring you joy rather than drive you crazy.
Yeah, I really agree with that. What you said about like the result, like, I mean, the thing about chess is it's so result driven. And I think in a way you have to focus on the process rather than the result. And so if you don't have all this time to dedicate to, doing an hour of tactics a night or something like that, like somebody like Andrew could just play as many tournaments as you can, just focus one move at a time, trying to play well. Don't worry too much if you hang a piece in a game or something and you lose, like, you have to be able to kind of brush it aside and, just focus on like how you're playing. I've seen plenty of people, I've had students. I had a student, he went 3-3 in a tournament once, and the 3 games he won were all like horrible, where he was getting killed and he swindled them. And the 3 games he lost, he was playing well and blundered. So it was upside down.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard as an adult because you're working and stuff. And you talk about my time period from when I was like 7 years old to 16 and didn't do anything. I had another period like that when I was working full time as an adult from like maybe 1997 so I was in my 20s, so maybe, the mid 90s to around 2005, where I was working full time. So I wasn't a chess player. I was a total amateur. I became an IM as a total amateur. I just took time off from work and I went to play in some tournaments and I hit my norms. But yeah, if you obsess over the rating and the results, it's not going to be so fun.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Okay, well, good advice, but let's bring it back to your book. So you mentioned you got into writing these chess books. So take us through, David, what the writing process is. How do you decide which opening to write about, and then how long does it take you to bang them out? Because we'll get to the Najdorf one in due time, but I noticed it's been a while since your last book. So
yes, it has been a while. I mean, essentially, when I moved back to Boston in 2006, I was already working on my first book, Challenging the Nimzo-Indian. And that book came about because I was in Las Vegas. The work I had switched to wasn't really so satisfying, and I wanted to, do more chess, and I was already thinking about moving back east and teaching a bit. And I ended up doing that book because I kind of gone through this process where I would play like mainline openings like D4 and C4 on the first two moves. And then sometimes the theory is too much. So I started playing like knight F3, C4, and, even more closed openings. But I would kind of go back and forth a bit. And then at some point I said, all right, I need to try to play more aggressively again. And I had always played Queen C2 against the Nimzo-Indian on the fourth move. And there weren't really any books on it. It was like a Delugi book, but it was pretty old. And so I thought either I have to pick a different opening, because that was how I learned, was from books. That's how I grew up. So I thought, if there's no book on it, I can't play it. Or I have to do the work myself. And for a lazy person like me, that was kind of daunting. But I thought, okay, if there's no material on this and I'm going to do the work myself, like maybe it could be published, right? If I'm going to do all this work anyway. So I talked to, I don't know who I talked to first, but I did get in touch somehow with Jacob Agard at Quality Chess. And at that point, I already had an IM title, which I thought was important as an author. People always ask me like, oh, when are you going for GM? But it was never really in my plans because I was always working full time and I was already an adult. But I thought to write books, like you should have the IM title. I mean, nowadays there's a lot of books written by, lesser known players. But so Agard basically said, well, send us a chapter to see, so we can see your writing. They're not just going to give you a contract. And so I did one chapter and sent it to them, and they gave me a contract, and that's basically how I wrote my first book.
And how long did it take you to write the book?
Probably a year.
Wow.
I would guess. I mean, when I came back to Boston, I didn't have any students or anything yet. I was fresh off the car, I guess. And so I was able to work on it quite a bit. But it took a while. I look back at the book now and it looks like very dense and stuff like that. So that book took a while. The next one, the Semi-Slav, took a long time. And then I switched publishers, not because anything was wrong, but because my first two books were like kind of so like heavy. And at the time, Gambit was doing these books like Chess Explained, where it was very fixed. The book had to be like something like 25 games and 125 pages, something like that. So I knew I couldn't get carried away and write like a 400-page book or something. So that's why I ended up switching publishers. It was just I just wanted to write a smaller book. And my friend Jim Rizzitano had done a couple books for them. So that's how I did that. And then after a couple with them, I did 4 for Everyman. And really, I did the books for a few reasons. One was I didn't really have too many students at the time, so it was just a way of making a little bit of money. It doesn't pay a ton writing chess books, but writing is something you can do in like kind of the off hours.
Exactly,
There's not many people to teach at 10 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
The kids are at school, the adults are working. But you can work on some chess if you're doing full-time chess. And essentially when I moved back to Boston, I was like, I'm going to just try to do chess. So I did all these Everyman books to kind of keep busy during those those daytime hours. But I also did it to work on my chess. I've done openings that, like most authors will do, openings that you're interested in. So you kind of look at it as like, I'm studying what I want to study anyway, and then I have to put it into like a book form, but I'll earn some income from it. And I also did it to kind of to create a brand in a way, because I'm like, all right, if I'm going to do chess, I think it will help if I'm better known. And so I wrote 8 books. And then, so to what you alluded to, it's been a while. So I think after 8 books, by then I had enough other work teaching and coaching that the books did not seem to be such an efficient way to generate income. But I also didn't see that there was any difference for building, the David Vigorito brand. I didn't think it really mattered if I had 8 books or 12 or 20, right?
Right.
So that's why I think it's been like 6 years since my last book.
I thought you were going to blame your children for sure, but
yeah, no, I mean, I can blame them for a lot, but I think it's funny because if you look at the insides of my my everyman books on the King's Indian, the Dragon, and the Grunfeld, like one will be like dedicated to my wife, and then the next one to my wife and daughter, and then the next one to my wife and daughter, and so you can see the family growing.
That's cool. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, okay, well, that makes sense. But first of all, it's good to hear that you're staying busy enough that it's not your biggest priority anymore. But I also imagine, this Najdorf book is quite ambitious. I picked it up on modern chess, forward chess, and browsed the lines that interest me and read the introduction. I didn't memorize it yet, though, David, so don't test me.
Neither did I.
But it's quite an undertaking. So how long have you been working on this one?
A couple of years. I'll tell you, the reason that I did this book is I thought that there was one summer, I think it was the summer of 2017, where I knew that I was doing like some classes and camps and things like that. But I also knew that I'd have like a few hours a day. And I thought, I've been playing this opening for so long, and I've taught it to so many students that are now masters, even 2,500 players, that I thought, I should be able to just like churn this out, no problem. And I offered it to another publisher, and they were like, no, that's okay. And then I started talking to Jacob and John Shaw again at Quality Chess, and eventually kind of the idea was born. But I thought that I would basically be able to do this book over the summer of 2017. And now we can see that we're more than 2 years beyond that, because the book that I thought would take me 4 months took me well over 2 years.
Yeah.
So thank you, John and Jacob, for being patient.
Yeah, the Najdorf in particular. It's kind of the classic author's lament that you think it's going to take X amount of time, and it takes
of course
5 times that, and then for it to be the Najdorf on top of that. It's totally understandable. But first of all, I just wanted to give you a shout. I liked your quote in the book where you talked about when you switched from the Dragon to the Najdorf, and you said it was time to grow up.
Yes.
So do you want to take us through that evolution?
Yeah, sure. I actually mentioned this, like Chris Ward winning with the Dragon, and then he had a winning with the Dragon 2. This was back in the 90s, I guess, maybe the mid 90s, something like that. And I think the Dragon's like a great opening for like young players to play, not like super beginners, because like real beginners, like E4, C5, like the opponent won't even know what's going on. But once you get maybe to 15, 1600 or something, because there's a lot of tactics and the strategy is very clear.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a lot of really thematic ideas. So you start seeing like, ideas recur in the opening. And of course, you have a lot of opposite castling, and you have to assess the initiative, and you also kind of start to learn like the value of material, like an exchange sack is very typical. Rook takes C3 or something, and so it's kind of an easy opening to play. But then at a certain point, you realize, and I mentioned this in the introduction, that it's also easy for the opponent. So if you're playing somebody lower, they know they're supposed to play H4 to H5 and, checkmate you. So I think also maybe the dragon, a lot of the lines I was playing like just don't hold up today. These lines in the Yugoslav attack where black plays like Queen A5 and Rook FC8, I think it just doesn't work. And then there was a line against castling on move 9 where you take on D4 and play same thing, like you try to play Queen A5. And these kind of like old-fashioned lines, which were they're a lot of fun when they work, but now in the computer age, we can see that they don't work. And the lines that do still work in the dragon tend to be kind of drawish, like black's just trying to prove that he's okay, that he's holding the position. So that's not quite as fun. But what happened was, I think in 1993, Danny King came out with a book, Winning with the Najdorf. It was the same series as the Dragon book. And this book was very digestible for me and, showed a lot of the ideas. And even now I remember some quotes from it. I tell people, like in chess, there's a lot of things that you hear something that seems profound and you remember it. Even if it's something basic like knights before bishops, you're like, yeah, all right. So King said something like, in the Najdorf, like in the sharper lines, you don't necessarily have to memorize it, but you have to get an idea of what you can and can't get away with. And so essentially, like it develops your intuition. So a lot of the positions in sharp openings will look scary, but if you kind of put your fear aside and start to study it, a lot of it will make sense. I mean, there were lines like this in the Semi-Slav too, in the Botvinnik, where I remember seeing some position and it looked like somebody just dumped a bag of pieces on the board. Like I didn't know what was going on. And then you start to study it and you start realizing, all right, you don't have to be a calculating machine. Like a lot of the ideas come up again and again. But the Najdorf is just much more interesting strategically than the dragon, I think. There's a wider range of typical pawn structures that you'll get and the plans associated with them. Even really just in the bishop e2 line, I think that's more strategically complicated. And I mean that like in a good way, strategically interesting than the dragon.
Yeah, I mean, and as you allude to in the book, I mean, the fact that the dragon is basically relegated to being sort of a surprise weapon at the elite level these days, but the Najdorf, I mean, everyone trots it out. I mean, MVL, of course, lives and dies by it, but, Nakamura, Anand, many others will play it. So, yeah, I mean, must have been a lot of work. So I've recently interviewed David, a series of opening authors, actually. Larry Kaufman, who just did his big a repertoire book on basically everything.
Right.
Krzysztof Zielecki, and they've been talking about how they're using engines. How do you use engines for your books, or especially the more recent ones?
Probably not as well as like somebody like Larry. Larry Kaufman. He's really a computer specialist, and he helped develop Komodo and stuff. And I highly doubt I have like top of the line hardware. That's for the most part. I used a version of Stockfish that another quality chess author got me onto, Nikos Naturlis. Told me where to find that.
And did anything surprise you? Like any particular thing that when you pulled it up in the engine, any shocking moves that you uncovered?
Maybe not shocking moves. I would say maybe the biggest surprise was in some lines of the Sozin in the Velimirovich attack. To me, it seemed like all the theory was wrong. The Sozin's not very popular because black has like 3 good answers to it, so you don't see it too much for white. But like the best book on the Sozin was probably a book by Golubev. It was a Gambit book that's got to be at least like 10 or 15 years old. And the line that I give, like in the Velimirovich attack, like everything is wrong, I think. And this isn't a knock on Golubev. I mean, Golubev's book is like the computers were ancient then, and he was giving practice, right? So essentially, like all the Grandmaster games and usually the grandmaster practice is right. Like these guys are pretty good. But so the lines that developed into the main lines, a lot of the stuff was wrong. And it's not in the lines that there's certain lines where everything is extremely forcing, and there the theory was correct. But it was some of these opposite castling lines where the lines that I thought black had like 3 or 4 decent options, it turned out like none of them were good. I actually kept finding improvements for white if he played precisely. So that was kind of discouraging. You're like, this has been my preparation for like 20 years or whatever. And suddenly you have the computer and it's just showing all these ideas for white, and it's kind of discouraging. And the line that I end up thinking where I thought black had 4 good moves, I found a 5th move that seems to be quite okay, but it's never been tried in practice. So that was one of the big computer surprises, I guess.
Okay, that'll be interesting to see. See it get put into practice now that you've released your book.
Yeah, but it might not, because people don't play the Sozin, so a lot of it might just be. And that's the thing is that might be something where maybe like the threat is stronger than the execution. Like people don't play the Sozin so much because black can play, knight c6 as I give in the book, or the more common lines from the Najdorf move order. Black plays b5 on move 7 or knight bd7 on move 7. But yeah, if you search, like, I bet if you looked in the database where both players are over, let's say 2,600 or 2,500 in the position after a6, and you look at the last 1,000 games, like I would bet maybe like 10 are in the Sozin, something like 1%,
pretty small.
Yeah, I mean everybody's playing like h3 or bishop g5, bishop e3. It's just not popular. Anymore.
And speaking of how many choices white has there on the 6th move in particular. When I talked to Krzysztof Zalecki, of course, his book is about the Sveshnikov Sicilian, so he was talking about in the Najdorf how much theory there is. And before we were recording, I was mentioning, I like the Najdorf in theory. I mean, not in theory in the chess sense. I like the idea of the Najdorf, but I don't study openings really, so it seems unlikely that I'm going to play it. And you started to try to convince me. So what's your sales pitch for the working chess enthusiast for why they should take up the Najdorf?
Well, I think the Najdorf is misunderstood because it's the lines that are the most well known are like the kind of flashy, sexy lines, the poison pawn and things like that. But like, I never really thought of myself as a tactical player. I am happy to play endings or, something with a kind of fixed structure where there's clear plans. I don't really like these random positions where you just have to calculate everything. And yet this is the opening I've been playing, practically my whole chess career. And a couple things that, like I mentioned in the introduction, like I found, like, teaching this opening is that I've had some players with a similar style to me where they were kind of shying away from tactics, but they were good strategically. So they were able to quickly adapt or quickly handle the Najdorf because they understood the pawn structures. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there are some sharper lines, especially in bishop g5. But no matter what you play, especially with black, like white can do something sharp or white can do something quiet. You don't always have like a clear choice. So tactics came about, and that would help them tactically. And I also found that players that were good at tactics, they didn't mind these positions, but then by studying the pawn structures, that helped them with their strategic understanding. Now, as far as like handling the material, I think like with a book like this, like if you play over the games in the book, and there's I think 50 games, you'll get a very good feel for the pawn structures because there's a lot of prose. And then you'll be nervous when you get to bishop g5. But the line that I chose because, it's the line I kind of grew up playing. It's the line that King gave. It's the line that Fischer, and then after him, like Brown and de Fermian played. But I think that a lot of the positions it's pretty clear what you're trying to do. And yeah, you have to be a little careful with your king. It's the Sicilian. But like, the Najdorf is not just the poison pawn. I actually tried to learn the poison pawn a couple times, but the positions were so random, and if you were one move out of book, like it wasn't even obvious what you were supposed to do. You really had to calculate. So even as a 30-year, something like that, Najdorf player, like I really can't handle the poison pawn. It just is, there's certain positions that you have to be able to just calculate everything like an engine. This is actually the problem I have with the Sveshnikov. I like the idea of playing the Sveshnikov. It's kind of more straightforward. White only has like, 2 or 3 like real ways to play. But there's also some weird positions where, White's sacking a piece on b5 and it becomes like really tactical. And so, all right, somebody like Carlsen, he's just going to memorize that out.
Right. And
it's really not a big deal, especially like when you do this full time, you have a team, you're getting ready for a world championship match. I mean, there's stories like what Magnus, he had memorized the population of every country in the world when he was 4.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm lucky if I can remember how to get home.
Right.
But the Najdorf, I feel like once you kind of know what the guideposts are, like you can find your way. So when I have situations where, somebody does some line and I don't really remember it, a lot of it I can figure it out. Sometimes you can also remember like some certain positions and go backwards and try to figure out like, all right, I know I have to avoid this. But I mean, I really think it's a strategic opening based on the pawn structure.
Okay.
There's sharp exceptions, but you can play the Caro Kann and like there's some very sharp lines, that are hard to avoid.
Yeah. And okay, so you made a pretty compelling case, I have to say. And one other follow-up that I actually meant to ask you when you were talking about the dragon being good for developing players, for players who are identified as attacking players. I have a student who fits that category, and she loves the dragon, and she does well with it because she understands the plans. But I was struggling to come up with something similar against d4 that doesn't involve a ton of theory. What would you recommend in that case?
Yeah, that's always people always want an opening for black where they can play for a win without risk, without much theory, right? Like,
yeah,
which
exactly. Yeah,
there's no such thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Najdorf fits that about as well as you can. But all right, if you play the Najdorf, like White can play the C3 Sicilian or Bishop B5, like, and you just have to kind of go with it and adjust your mentality. But yeah, I mean, against D4, I think it depends on the style. If she likes, would prefer like fluid positions that are more open and tactical, I think the Grunfeld is good. Yeah, there's theory, but like when I was younger, I did really badly against the Grunfeld. Even if people didn't know what they were doing, right? They castle, they play C5 and Queen A5, and but otherwise, I mean, the King's Indian is good because
I tried that. She thought it was too closed.
Yeah, well, it's like the Najdorf in this sense that it's based on an understanding of the pawn structure. I mean, I could draw, even though they're not really the same type of opening, but I could draw a lot of parallels between the Najdorf and the King's Indian because I could show you like 5 different pawn structures in each.
Right.
And discuss the plans with you. And that helps. I think against D4, I mean, the difference is like you have move order issues. So you can't just say like play the Panko Gambit because then somebody will play like Knight F3 on move 1 and like they won't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, if the King's Indian is too closed, then tell her she has to learn how to play close positions. Or
right. Yeah.
Exactly. I know. Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
But I mean, the Grunfeld is good. I've actually one reason I did like a book on the Grunfeld, which it's not a repertoire book. It was this like chess developments, just showing the new ideas. Was I thought it would be like, if I play the King's Indian, the Grunfeld could be like a surprise weapon or something. But I also thought it would help me with White because I'd struggled facing it with White. But I think there's like certain shortcuts you can take in the Grunfeld. Like you don't have to. Like in the Rook B1 line, like you don't have to go down the rabbit hole of 40 moves of theory to get a drawn ending. There's like a lot of different things that you can do, and I think a lot of D4 players don't like facing the Grunfeld.
Yeah, I've especially even at the top level, I've noticed.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, somebody recently wrote that basically the white's main weapon against the Grunfeld is just like doing something random and hoping it works as a surprise.
Right.
You know.
Okay, so moving to a different topic, David, we have a question from another Massachusetts area native, who is Brian D'Souza. And Brian asks, he has two questions actually, but we'll take them one by one. He says, as someone who grew up in the Boston area in the late 1980s, I found it a great place to be an active expert level tournament player, especially in the pre-computer era where one needed to live in an area of strong players in order to improve. Do you have any comments on the Boston chess scene then versus now?
Oh, Brian D'Souza, as I told you, Ben, like I played Brian once. Maybe he forgot, hopefully.
No, secretly he mentioned it to me, but...
Oh, all right. Yeah, all right. It would have been funny if it was part of his question.
Yeah, no, he was trying to be diplomatic, but
yeah, good. I appreciate that. Yeah, I played Brian, I think in the maybe the early 90s, and I was 2185. I looked it up, and he was 2120, and I was white, and I absolutely got slaughtered. He played the King's Indian, maybe that's why. But yeah, he crushed me. And Ben, when I talked to you, I thought maybe I had played him again and won, but I didn't see anything. So I'm 0-1 against Brian. Back then. There were a lot of tournaments. I played Brian at this Armenian Cultural and Educational Center. Maybe he remembers. And there used to be all these tournaments where this is actually like how I got better. There were all these tournaments. A lot of them were 4-round, 2-day tournaments, like something like 40-2, and then sudden death or maybe even 2 or 3 time controls. And I mean, it's changed a lot. And I think the reasons for that is I think there's certain players that used to play a lot that are good chess players. They could be 1400 to 2200, and they don't necessarily want to put aside a whole weekend because the speed of life has increased, and maybe they just can get their fix from playing online. A lot of the tournaments that Brian and I grew up with have turned into one-day tournaments that they still have, the Harry Pillsbury Memorial, the Greater Boston Open. These are like one-day Game 60 type tournaments. So I don't really like it as much. I mean, it's nobody's fault. It's just a different change in scenery. Also, the makeup of the players is different. Back then, there were a lot of active players in like the 2400s. And now I don't really like playing locally so much. You just play the same people a lot. I think Boston is not so organized for having tournaments. There's a bunch of scattered chess clubs. I think the best run one, the Metro West Club, they have a tournament that's like it's typical. It's like a Tuesday night, 1 game a week.
Yeah.
And so that's what they do, and they do it very well, but that's not going to get you to rapidly improve like playing 1 game a week. Whereas, I mentioned when I was young, I could play 2 4-round tournaments each month. So, then you're playing good players and a variety of players, and you can improve.
Yeah, I mean, I think 1 game a week is good for most people. I think it's just you're too strong. Like you're at the top of the the top of the distribution, so you'll be pared down more often.
Yeah, but the people, I have a friend who's like 1900, and he just decided to go play, and he like played like an 800. So like that's or like if you can't go 1 week, you take a half point bye, and then you play an 800 who took a half point bye.
Yeah,
where you can play 4 rounds.
Yeah, you'll get a few games worth of time.
You'll get a few games. So it's greatly changed. Like, I mean, this year I decided to greatly reduce these local tournaments. I mean, you talk about my rating gain over time, but you might have also, because you already told people to look at my rating graph, people will notice I lost 150 points, but and I think I got to the heart of that, and I've gained like 50 points back in the last few months, which is not so easy for an old timer. But
so what was the issue?
Well, I mean, I think like, all right, if you're stronger than everybody, like if I go to a club and everybody's a couple hundred points below me, it's very hard to have the self-discipline to take the game seriously enough when you're higher than everybody, and so there's a tendency for somebody like me to like mail it in a bit, and then you're vulnerable because you're not playing it at full speed. I played a tournament a month ago where I started out playing like experts and stuff like that, and it seemed very hard to beat them. And it probably was, but I was also trying really hard. So I think that helped. But I just decided to just try to play in more quality events, which is harder because sometimes you have to travel and pay and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it depends where you are. But I think in Boston, I wish that there was a little more of like a kind of a central system where you could get a bigger variety of players, because I go to these local tournaments and I play friends, I play students.
Yeah.
I played Alexander Ivanov like almost 70 times.
Right.
So the idea of like going to some game 60 and playing Ivanov and playing one of my students who's 2250, 2300, playing one of my friends who's 2300, it's you also, like when you play the same people like that, you don't approach your preparation the right way. Because you're instead of preparing yourself, you're preparing for these people. Like, for example, in the Najdorf, like if I play Ivanov, like he's going to play one of a couple lines. So I end up focused on those instead of like a broader type of preparation. Or you play a student, like, it's very awkward because like, what are you going to play against them,
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you have anything planned? Any road trips for tournaments?
Yeah, I'm going to go on New Year's Day to Charlotte for the Charlotte Open. It's like one of my favorite cities to go to play. I have good friends there. I might go to Las Vegas again. I went there last year and had a good tournament. Maybe Foxwoods again. I had a good tournament there. Yeah, I really just made like an attitude adjustment for these big tournaments, and it changed things. Yeah, I went from chess is weird. Like you can struggle to beat like a 2100 and then you can beat a grandmaster, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense, but yeah. So I'm really just going to try to play in these bigger tournaments. But it's very tricky for not just talking about like an IM, but for anybody, because like you want to play good tournaments, but you want to play.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of stuck in this where like I'd really like to play more often. I'd like to at least play like once a month, but I don't want to go play game 60 against players I've played dozens of times already. Like I don't see that that's productive. I also don't see that like going to like a local club and playing people 400 points below me is productive. So
makes sense.
Yeah, it's so easy.
Okay, let's get to the second part of Brian's question, which is something, again, we've touched on, but I'd like for you to answer it directly if you don't mind, which is, he says, I appreciate the opening videos you've done over the years. They help me fill in holes in my opening repertoire after returning to the game from a 25-year absence. Do you feel like you've given too many secrets in these videos, though?
Yeah, there's a funny question, which you could also apply to the books, I guess, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, So he's talking about these opening videos I've done for some sites where there might be today I'm going to show you how to play blah blah blah, and no, I don't really worry about giving away the secrets. I mean the videos aren't as detailed as the books, but even if you say like, okay, I wrote books on the King's Indian and the Najdorf, I'm still playing the King's Indian. When I go to Charlotte, I'll probably play the Najdorf. Because if you're immersed in something, like you're likely to be able to figure it out at the board. I've had people that actually do the opposite, where they say, oh, he wrote a book, I don't want to play that against him.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, come on, like this book's like over 500 pages. Like I can't remember everything in there. I mean, I'll play like a blitz game on online, and I'll lose some King's Indian, and then I literally will grab like my own book off the shelf to see what I was supposed to do, because I can't remember all of it. And it's like that with the other openings. And I also kind of have this approach, like I played a Najdorf against like some 2150 a couple weeks ago, and I thought, oh, should I do something else? This is So this was even before the book was out, but I thought, is it too risky or something like that? And I kind of approached it like, well, if I forget something or he's prepared, like, I'll learn something, The good thing about playing an opening like the Sicilian or the King's Indian is even if you lose, like, you'll probably learn something and it'll be like a fun game.
Yeah.
Unless you hang some. I mean, at least it's going to be interesting chess, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, if you play like some quiet opening and just get tortured to death, it's usually not very fun. But yeah, I don't really worry about giving away secrets because, so many of these tournaments, there's not much time to prepare, like in these Swiss tournaments. I mean, at Foxwoods, like I'm playing like IMs and GMs, and you have like 10 minutes to prepare if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So what are they going to do? Like find some hole in my book, like in 10 minutes or something? Maybe in like a round robin, like if it's one game a day and people have all the time in the world to prepare, you might want to have some surprises or something. But I don't do that too much.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, David, just one more if you're up for it. I didn't prep you for this, but do you have any stories about meeting, famous chess players? Any crazy experiences that you're willing to share?
Meeting famous chess players. Let's see. What was it? It was 1998 or 99 when Alexander Kalifman won the World Championship in Las Vegas. I lived there, and he won the tournament. And at the time, I lived with a woman, and she was a seamstress, and she actually made the sash that Kalifman is wearing in some pictures that say World Champion or something like that. And we were at like the dinner thing. I don't have any stories about Kasparov or Karpov or anything. I've known Hikaru Nakamura since he was a kid. Mm-hmm. But that's just proximity, right? We're both in the US. Like, we even joked once, like, we both used to be 2350, and we were always like, we never played because we're always like next to each other. But yeah, somehow he got a little better. But yeah,
in hindsight, it feels like that was like a snap of the fingers, right?
Yeah, of course. But but there's a difference, right? Like at this time, like I was probably in my late 20s, and he was probably in his like early teens, if that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
amazing. Okay, so David, anything else on your end? Anything you want to plug? If you have a website, right? If people want to reach you?
Yeah, it's a pretty simple website just for some presence. Like if people want to reach me, I'm pretty busy as far as lessons are concerned, but yeah, sometimes I can make time. It always depends on scheduling is really the trickiest thing.
10 a.m. on weekdays, they can hit you up.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes but you know what? I've actually tried to cut back on these random daytime lessons because, talking about this year, trying to kind of fix things and my lazy nature. Another thing that I realized this year was that, like, when you were asking me how I got better, how I became a master and stuff, like it tended to be kind of easy for me. And I actually realized, just it's a little too late, that I never really worked hard on chess. And I don't mean this like, oh, I'm such a genius, I never worked on chess, but it was everything just kind of flowed for me with chess. And it's all relative. I'm not a grandmaster. You have people that are much higher than me. It just depends which room you're in. But I realized that, okay, if I want to actually kind of get back to where I was, like I might have to do some work. So I'm trying to clear my schedule a little bit in the morning and actually try to, work on a few things, work on some tactics. It was like a little self-reflecting. Maybe because I'll be 50 next year, I realized that, all right, I don't have all the time in the world. And when you lose 150 points, it kind of ticks you off,
Yeah, although you'll get to play in the senior championships, right?
I know. Yeah, somebody was telling me like, oh, this is how many points you need for the senior championship. It was only about 3 or 4 years ago I told my wife that it just finally occurred to me that I'm no longer a promising young player.
Right. But she knew a long time ago.
Yeah, she realized a long time ago. But that's how I was kind of viewed, in the late 80s, just as a master who was like 18 years old. And I always remember there was one guy at a chess club. I think I was maybe like 20, and I was still 2200. And he was, this was mean thinking back. He's like, oh, like you were this like promising young player and you haven't made any progress. You know, this is what he says to like a 20-year-old,
right.
You know, this I'm like, 50-year-old expert or something,
It's funny.
Knocking me. Yeah.
All right. Well, David, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks for taking the time, and good luck with the book and everything else.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ben.
Thanks to everyone who helps make Perpetual Chess possible, most of all to my producer, Matthew Passy, but also to everyone who helps spread the word about the show, whether via word of mouth, positive reviews on Apple Podcasts or other platforms. All of that stuff helps more people find out about the show. But most of all, I want to thank the people who support the show financially. You guys have enabled me to continuously work to improve and now expand the Perpetual Chess podcast offering. So for that, I am forever grateful. I would like to give thanks to the following people and entities. Special thanks to Chessable.com, Quality Chess Books, the Capital City Chess Club, Apprentice's Twitch channel, Andrew Bach, Austin Clef, Benjamin Porteau, Kathy Carr, Chad Oliver, Dan O'Hanlon, Danny Davidson, David Schreiber, I am Dimitri Schneider, Faraz Sawaf, Gary Foreman, Greg Natel, I am Greg Shahadi, Guven Manet, Jens Green, John Jernigan, John Cromarty, Kelly Palmer, Lone Pine Chess, Lorraine Dore, Lucio Casada Silva, the law offices of Stuart Katz, Michael Kahn, Mike Zelazny, Moonmaster 9000, where you been hiding, Moonmaster? You haven't asked a question in a while. Reuven Fisher, Seattle Chess Club, Thomas Stonix, Thomas Tachenko, Todd Bryan of Strong Chess, Todd Kennedy, and I would also like to give thanks to the following people and entities: Aaron Waffler, Ace Vallega, Adam Ralph of ChessEngland.com, Adrian Gutierrez, Alex Pejas, FM Andre Terakov, Andrew Perry, BetterChessTraining.com, Bill Moran, Brad and Andy Rosen, Brett Howard Lynn, Brian Mullis, Chad Hilton, Chris Balcom, Chris Flanagan, Chris Wainscott, Christopher Baumgartner, Christopher Chabris, Chris Lott, Christopher Wood. I am Christoph Zalecki, aka Chess Explained, Coach J's Chess Academy, Courtney Fry, Daniel Gell, Daniel Ginsberg, Daniel Lucas of US Chess, Daniel Naylor, Dave Saylor, David Cramley, Dalen Shelton, Dwayne Edmonds, Ethan Smith, I am elect, Donnie Ariel, or possibly not I am elect. Either way, Donnie Ariel, Fox Valley Chess Club, Frank Tortoris, MD, Gary Andrews, Gary Lewis, Geert Vandervelt of Chessable, Gerard Barta, Giovanni Russo, Han Shu, Harish Srinivasan, James Bonastia, Jason Anfang, Jason Woolham, Jeffrey Martello, Jerry Wells, JJ Stranad, John Fernandez, John Fontaine, John Hartman, John McMurtry, Jordan Goodwin, Justin Gardner, Jen Shahadi, Joel Rocky, John Thompson, GM Josh Friedel, I am Kare Christensen, WGM Katarina Nemtsova, Kelly Palmer, I am Kostya Kovutsky, Krishna Gopala Krishnan, Larry Ryforth, Laura Belyavsky, Martin Knudsen, Matthew Passy, Matthew Tedesco of SeattleChessMeetup.org, Mechanics Institute Chess Club of San Francisco, Michael Allard, Miguel Arispide, Mr. Mike Shahadi, Nate Salon, Neil Bruce, Olaf Mueller-Michaels, GM Pascal Charbonneau, Passy Passanen, Paul Bain, Paul Clarkson, Paul Swaney, Paula Santana, Peter Lux, Peter Merrifield, Peter Sodi, Randy Temple, Ricky Grijalva, Roy Yearwood, Ryan Berg, the Say Chess YouTube channel, Scott Doherty, Scott McKinnon, Sebastian Finsterwater, WGM, Tatyav Abrahamian, Tim Brennan of TacticsTime.com, Tim Seymour, Timothy Ha, Tom Edsel, Tomas Komanich, Tony Rotella, Tyrin Price, Victor Vrancoulge, Wayne Beam, William Brock, William Peterson, FM Zhao Cheng of Chess1000.com, and last but never least, Zhivko Stoyanov. Thanks, everyone. I will catch you guys next week.